All right, perfect. We are live, guys and girls. Welcome back. Well, welcome, I guess I should say, to I guess I like to call these mind over markets, right? This is my kind of product that I bring to the market when it comes to psychology, and I think it's a perfectly fitting name. If you're interested in attending some of these calls, I think what you're going to have experienced at some point in time is the gap in performance between what you know may be possible on paper, and then the reality, which is you tend to make silly mistakes, you tend to have bad habits, you seem to be unable to control or manage risk in an effective way. And a lot of these things are the reason that there is a gap between the performance that you have on paper and what essentially we're trying to get you closer to when you go live. So just to give me some context, I'm going to try and make this session as interactive as possible. I'm going to go through a little bit of content with you guys, and then towards the end, if there are questions, we'll open things up for a little bit of Q&A. Um, Feel free to throw out in the Zoom chat, how long have you guys been trading for? How much experience have you guys had in the game? Just to give me an idea of where everyone is at. 1 year, 2 years, 1 year, 2 years. Okay, so most people around the 1 to 2 year mark. 3 years, 1.5. Okay, cool. So I presume the reason you're here, and again, we can openly discuss this as we go throughout the session. Like I said, I'm happy for you guys to tune in conversation in the chat, and we can go back and forth on this. I presume most of you are here because you have bad habits. You have something in terms of your mindset which is holding you back from the potential that you know you can achieve. There is a very, very common issue in this space in where the gap between what makes somebody profitable or unprofitable, or even a break-even trader to a profitable trader, that gap is usually closed with psychology. That gap is usually closed with better understanding who you are as a person and ultimately how you respond to certain situations which involve fear, greed, confidence, and many of these different areas. And so what I want to talk about today is the importance of our belief system, but I want to build this up in a way that gives a little bit of context. And I actually want to start by discussing what most people do wrong. Because one of the things that I focused on in my journey, I'll give you a little bit of context as to sort of my background for some of you that, or probably most of you that don't know me. I started trading in 2012, and I spent the majority of my first few years, at least the first 6 years, basically losing money every single year. I couldn't find my way to profitability. I was a slave to my emotions. I could not find any sort of consistency behind my actions, which meant that my live results ultimately sucked. I always made decisions based on what I felt and not what my data told me. And in the long run, it really screwed me over, led me to a very dark place. And it's what kind of eventually pushed me into the position I'm in now. I fell into this position working as a performance coach very accidentally. But I have a love for psychology. I like working with people. And it was honestly a lot of my own painful experiences that got me to a point where it made sense just to share my journey with others that are trying to do the same thing. And what I realized is there's a lot of people that go through the same level of shit that I went through. And I'm not sitting here saying I'm perfect. I'm not sitting here saying I'm the best trader in the world. I'm not sitting here saying that I make money every single day. I think what you're going to come to learn off the back of all of these sessions that we do is I am very real about the reality of what trading is like. I don't sell anybody the dream. I don't tell people that it's easy. I don't promise overnight riches. What I do promise is by the end of these 8 weeks, you're going to better understand yourself. You're going to understand why you have the bad habits that you have. And most importantly, you're going to understand and hopefully walk away with a framework that's going to help to break free of those. Because I think that's where a lot of people get stuck. A lot of people recognize they have shitty habits which constantly work against them, but they don't really know how to break free of them. And so what I get most people to do is better understand why you experience most of the things that you tend to experience. And when you have a better understanding of that, you realize that most humans are just not wired to be good traders. And this is why the statistics are the way they are. This is why most people will lose money over a long enough period of time. And I do not believe, no matter how much education is out there, that those statistics will drastically change, right? I think they will more or less remain in that ballpark of 95% of people consistently losing money. Okay. What I want to take you guys through, I want to share my screen. I'm going to pull up a whiteboard. I don't mean to make this too like school-like, but there's a lot of content that I'm going to work through with you guys over the coming few weeks. And what I'm going to do is essentially try and type up a lot of these notes as we go. We'll do this with a little bit of the Q&A as well. And at the end of the session, I will create a PDF of the whiteboard, and then I will share it back in the folder that David has shared with you guys. So I always encourage, if you guys would like to make notes, please feel free to make notes of your own. But everything that you will see on the board today, I will give you guys a screenshot of so that you have your own copies. And of course, there will be a copy of this recording as well. So let's get stuck in. Okay, perfect. Let me... Okay, can I just double check? Everyone can see the whiteboard all good? Just want to make sure the screen sharing is working all good. Okay, perfect. Awesome. So this is where we are today, right? We are week 1, and today we're talking about the importance of our belief system. And I want to cover a few topics today. I want to start by talking about the underlying problem, because I think this is something that is probably not addressed early enough for a lot of people. Now, when we talk specifically about the underlying problem when it comes to trading, I think a lot of people, and again, I tell you this from my experience, and I'm presuming that there's going to be a lot of people that can relate to this idea. A lot of people come into this industry and they believe that the biggest issue is they don't understand the markets. They believe they don't understand enough about how the market works, or the secret algorithm, or order blocks, or support and resistance, or any other mumbo jumbo. Again, this is not to discredit anyone or anything. This is just saying that there are 1,000,001 ways to do technical analysis, and people will paint it out a very different way in all of those approaches. But ultimately, it leaves you in one place. It leaves you thinking that you do not know something about the markets, which is why you're failing. And this is why you're enticed by new strategies and new ideas and new ways of analysis, and you're overthinking everything that happens because you think, if I lost money and somebody else made money, they know something that I don't know. The reality is, and I want to make this as plain and clear as absolutely possible, the reality is that 70 to 80% of people lose money trading. And this is primarily their own capital, right? 70 to 80% of people that are trading their own capital lose money. They fail to make money over a consistent period of time. And I don't tell you this based on opinion. This is not me, telling you something which is not true. Inside the UK and Europe, they had legislation that came into place in 2017 or 18, I believe it was. It's called ESMA, ESMA. And under these regulations, every single regulated broker has to disclose what percentage of their clients actually make or lose money. So if you look at any broker that is regulated under those jurisdictions, they will say on the top of their website, this is the percentage of clients that make money. You could look at IG, CMC, Oanda. Like I said, any of the big name brands that regulated in those space, at the top of their website, they will have a big disclaimer, and it falls somewhere between only around 20 to 25% maybe are actually making money over a period of time. So we know for a fact the vast majority of people trading their own money, they lose over a period of time. The latest statistics I saw from the prop firm space, which I presume many of you are going down that route. Again, some of you will know I work with the prop firm Funded Next, have done for about 18 months or so now. I work with a lot of their traders on psychology. And so I know the space very well, but from the statistics that I was last seen, which are a little bit outdated, from January, February time this year, the statistics were 97% of prop traders don't make it to their first payout. Okay. Sorry, I'm going to have to format this as I go. This is clearly not going to play ball with me today. So 97% of prop traders don't actually make it to their first payout. And these are important things to be aware of. This is the reality of the market. So the reason I share this right at the very beginning of anytime I do a boot camp like this is I don't like to bullshit people. I don't like to tell people that this game is easy, and if you learn to draw a few lines on the chart, you're going to simply magically be able to understand how everything works and the markets just become an ATM, right? I don't like to sell people the dream because this job is fucking hard. And until you sit down and you start working on the right things with a good framework behind you and you invest in playing the long game, you will struggle. So I put these statistics out there to share the reality so that you don't get disillusioned into believing all of the bullshit that you see on social media. Because for the large part, that's what it is. People that are posting constant wins, daily payouts, saying that they never lose, all of this bullshit, it's not a reality of the markets. And like I said, I don't like to trick people into believing that it's something that it's not. Yeah, Dino's right. Twitter's becoming a very big place for that. Instagram was always terrible for the lifestyle marketers. But yeah, Twitter's just as bad for people posting consistent payouts. And the problem is when you're only seeing the highlight reel of how people are performing, you're not really seeing the reality. It's very easy to believe that trading is easier than you think it is. It's easy to think that you're missing a piece of the puzzle. When I started trading in 2012, it was actually hard to find the right information. There was no there was no good sources of information out there from people that had experience, or at least it wasn't publicly available. I started and spent most of my time on Baby Pips. And that was, as far as I knew, the biggest time between that and maybe Forex Factory. Those were the biggest sources of information. There were no trading communities. The Instagram lifestyle gurus didn't really exist. It was a very tough time to try and find the right education, and I think that's a big reason why I spent a lot of time losing money. I didn't have the right guidance. I didn't have anybody to tell me the mistakes that I was making, and it just led me to a place that I struggled to really find my feet in. And so when I started, as I said, the issue was a lack of information. I found this true for a good chunk of my time. I truly believe that there wasn't enough information to help me find my feet. But in this day and age, I would say the issue is maybe we have an abundance of information. I would say actually in this day, and age, we have too much information. And maybe the right way to put it is too much misinformation. And the problem is, who do you believe? Right? Everyone claims to know basically everything these days. Everyone has a course to sell you. Everyone has something that to tell you, I am, what you should be listening to and who you should be listening to. But how do you actually know what to believe? And it's very difficult, right? Even for someone like myself. And again, I'm not saying that I'm a know-it-all or I've been all there and done that. It's more a case of it's very hard to know who is legit in this industry anymore. My question to you guys is, and this is why I want to start the session off in this way. My question to you guys is, if in this day and age there is actually an abundance of information, why aren't the statistics different? Because when I started, the statistics, at least prop firms weren't really a big thing, but that statistic was exactly the same. 70 to 80% of people were still losing money in, when I found out 2017, when everything got regulated and this became a lot more transparent, this statistic was exactly the same. If the issue was a lack of information, if the issue was that you do not know enough about the markets, why are more people not making money? And so this led me down a interesting train of thought, right? And again, I think some of you are going on to the right train of thought with this, which is mentality, psychology. It's more so about how you start thinking about the markets. And I think Myers is right. When you have too many different strategies and too much information, it actually doesn't give you answers. It leaves you more fucking confused. It puts you in a place of exactly as they put analysis paralysis. And so the conclusion that I came to and the path that I went down was not that people don't know enough about the markets. It's really that people don't know enough about themselves, right? This was where my journey really began. The moment I stopped believing that the answers that I'm looking for are in the markets, this is where my journey really began of finding some path to profitability. After I stopped losing money after about 6 years or so, I went on then a break-even path for, I would say probably another 3 years after that, 2, 3 years after that, maybe. And only in the last 3, maybe 4 years, I started finding my path of somewhat consistent profitability. And I say somewhat because I don't make money every month. I'm a more of a longer term trader. I'm a swing trader. And so I have periods of drawdown. I have days, weeks, sometimes months, sometimes quarters where I don't make money. But again, that is my reality. And I'm not saying that because that's what I'm expecting you guys to exactly replicate. Some of you may become far more profitable or have a far better strategy than I do. But the purpose of why we're here is to help you to understand that the issue that most people have is they are focusing on the wrong thing. Most people are focusing on the idea that they do not know enough about the markets. And the more that you constantly think that and you don't settle for one approach in the markets, you're never going to start looking at the one place that actually has all of the answers that you're looking for. And that is usually, it's in your mind. It's all a game of psychology. It's understanding how you react to risking money. It's about understanding about what your fears are really representing inside of you. It's about understanding how your mind responds to certain experiences and how that changes your level of confidence. I often find that giving people some kind of education into psychology fills in a part of the missing pieces to the puzzle to get you to understand why most people will never be consistently profitable traders. Okay. So I want to expand on this a little bit. I want to talk a little bit more about what people tend to do wrong. Because where I feel a lot of people are stuck is they are constantly doing battle with their mind. They're constantly in a position where they are thinking it's my mind that's screwing me over. It's me that is the problem. My mind wants me to fail. I'm self-sabotaging. I'm an idiot. They just beat themselves up with a lot of this problem. And again, if you never stop to understand and think about this idea that your mind is not against you, right? The first thing I like to teach people about psychology is the purpose of your mind. The purpose of your mind is really one thing: survival, right? Your mind's core primary purpose is to keep you alive and safe and away from danger, away from threats, away from pain. And understanding this as an aspiring trader, or maybe even for some of you here, maybe even some consistently profitable traders that are looking to take it to the next level, understanding the core purpose of your mind is very, very important, because there are many times in the markets where you will be faced with decisions that talk about fear, that are linked to confidence, that are related in some way to something which is happening internally, as opposed to what most people think controls the market, which is something external, right? I truly believe that the markets are a representation of human psychology. It doesn't really matter what happens in terms of news or war or terrorism or whatever it may be. For the vast majority of people, the markets are controlled by human psychology, because it's people and machines on the other end of every order that you place that are basically putting themselves in a position where they control where the money goes, right? People get to decide, I want to buy or I want to sell here, or they're dictated to by the terms of the clients that need to move large sums of money around, which is a lot of what happens in the banking sector. And so what I tell people is, if the markets are really controlled by humans, and humans are susceptible to basically all psychological changes, we need to understand the mind. If you don't understand the mind, you don't understand the markets. And I'm not sure you'll ever get to a place where you fully understand the markets, but the closer you can be to understanding people and human psychology, you will start to understand why things work the way they work. Why is it that most people always lose money? Why is that the case? And in reality, it's because most people are not very great at operating in uncertain environments. And the reason behind that is exactly this: we are wired for survival. In situations where you are put in a place where you don't know what is going to happen next, your mind is designed to go into fight or flight mode. When you go into fight or flight mode, you get a rush of hormones, you get adrenaline, you get cortisol, you're filled with stress. All of these things run through your body, and it makes it almost impossible to think with your brain. And it is almost a certainty that you will act based on whatever gut instinct you have inside of you. And those of you that suffer with FOMO, or a lack of discipline, or a lack of patience, that know what you should be doing in the markets but struggle to do it, you will understand that because you've probably been in that situation many times. And so what you have to understand is your mind is not working against you. Your mind is working in a way that operates actually completely fine in the rest of the world. Experiencing fear and anxiety and worry and stress in other areas of life are survival instincts. If you were all dropped in a jungle tomorrow and you heard a rustling in the bushes and you were completely alone, it's very likely that you'd feel scared or worried or anxious. And it's your mind is not telling you to feel that so it can screw you over. It's telling you, or it's signaling for you to feel that so that you get a rush of hormones through your body, so that you're able to act quickly, fast. You don't have to sit there and think, okay, what is the most logical and calculated decision? And the problem is when we bring this old school mentality into trading and we don't understand what our mind is trying to do, the way that it naturally responds to fear does not make you, most people at least, naturally great traders. So part of your mind's survival mechanism is what I like to call a pain avoidance. Can I spell today? Clearly not. Pain avoidance mechanism, right? This pain avoidance mechanism essentially is working constantly to keep you free from danger, to keep you free from pain, and essentially just to keep you in a pleasant and happy state, because that's what your mind believes is good for survival. So when it comes to trading, there is a big aspect of what we do that is linked with fear, and it controls every aspect of what we do in the markets. So, for example, you will often note that a lot of traders tend to close their positions too early because they fear missing out on the potential gains that are open within their current position, right? Or you may find that some people hold on to their losing trades for far too long. The idea has been invalidated, but they move their stop loss or they remove their stop completely because they are hoping they get back to a place of break even, because they are so fearful of accepting that short-term pain. That is your mind telling you to avoid pain and seek pleasure. So your pain avoidance mechanism is constantly working to do exactly this: avoid pain and seek pleasure. And this is really, really important to understand about how your mind is naturally operating. So I want to give you guys a few more specific examples of exactly how this pain avoidance mechanism works for a lot of people. Marlon says, survival is also your mind pushing you into a comfortable space. A comfortable space can be one of the worst habits you have. Agreed. Completely agreed. And your mind pushes you into that comfort zone because it's safe. It feels protected. It feels familiar. This is why trading is difficult for so many people, right? We are looking for certainty. We're looking for familiarity. Every time we take a loss, we're like, why the fuck didn't that work when my analysis told me it should work? And we start overthinking it, and you start changing your strategy, and then you get inconsistent. It is all part of the game, right? Dino says, literally did this today. Hirach, hoping I'm pronouncing that correctly, says, yeah, I moved my stop loss to break even and price just taps into break even and plus blast through, take profit. Dino says, same. So again, understand what is happening in the mind here. Your mind is making this a more attractive decision to make simply because it understands if you're in a position where you potentially cannot lose any money, that's a good place to be. There's no fear. There's no pain. There's no threat from the outside environment. So it's easy to say, I should move my stop loss to break even. And if that is not in alignment with how your edge or your strategy works, that's a fundamental problem. Okay. So N&M says, is this the same with overtrading? Exactly, right? You ask most people why they overtrade, and it will come down to usually one of two things. The two most common reasons I tend to hear is, number one, I took a loss and I'm trying to make back that loss. And that's the reason I'm taking more trades than my strategy has presented, and I'm trying to make back that money. You're feeling pain from the losses that you've experienced, and therefore you're trying to get involved in the market. The other side of overtrading, which is common for a lot of people, is boredom, right? A lot of people tend to trade out of boredom because being bored is a sense of discomfort. It's something that we don't want to experience. And so we try and create some level of excitement in the markets. And again, in reality, doesn't necessarily work out so well for us in the long run. Dino says, can failure in the past, like a kind of trauma, also be a thing that influences someone in the mind, like something in school, university, back at time? Dino, in the short answer, 100% yes. But we're going to talk about that today, right? When we talk about belief systems, we're going to talk about situations exactly like this. So yeah, very good question. And I'm glad you're already starting to think about this in this kind of way. So battling the mind, I want to give you guys a few examples of how this plays out for many people. So a few of them we've already discussed at the moment. And I'm pulling up these because these tend to be the most common issues that I speak to with traders about, right? It's things that everyone seems to suffer with. FOMO, the fear of missing out. I'm sure everyone has been there at some point in time, right? You end up jumping into trades without proper analysis in a fear that, the market's going to go without you, but you're driven by the pain of missing out on potential money. Again, it's pain, it's fear. It's pushing you to do something that's not really in line with your plan. If you're someone that's over trading, right? Entering too many trades, as I mentioned before, usually to recover from losses, it's fueled by that discomfort of being in a position of having less money than you started with, something that we don't want to really experience. Avoiding losses, right? One that we already talked about. Removing your stop loss entirely, or maybe not using one to begin with, or pushing it continually further and further away, to ensure that you don't feel the pain of accepting a loss and you just sit in a place of hope, wishing that the market turns around and ends up going in your favor. I mean, in reality, sometimes you might get lucky. More often than not, at some point in time, you're going to put yourself in a position where you blow your account, right? You do something silly. NNM says the anxiety of wanting to recover what I have lost is what's killing my trading, right? So again, it's feeling very clear, at least from the conversation, that you guys can relate to much of what I'm talking about here. And again, this is the first thing I want you guys to recognize is this is not your mind against you. This is your mind simply trying to protect you from pain. This is a really maybe simple concept to understand, but it's important that it's covered right now because what we start to build on over the coming 8 weeks is all based around this idea. It's all based around the idea that your mind is looking for certainty. And what we're going to be doing is focusing on creating an environment which focuses on probability. And when you start to really focus on that, you're going to start to understand that there is a power behind the framework that we are teaching. And your mind can actually be a very logical place, and it can actually be something that you make friends and peace with, and you can actually start to use it to your advantage, which you're going to find over the coming weeks as you get better and better at unpacking your psychology. Okay, so I want to quickly recap where we are so far. What we've identified at the moment is at this point in time, most people are doing battle with their mind. Most people are thinking that their mind is against them. They're thinking that they don't know enough about the markets. And what most people try and do, and this is for everyone that has spoken in the chat so far and has identified or related to some of the things that I've been speaking about, what most people do is they try and change their actions, right? Again, how many of you guys have been in this position? How many of you guys have decided, I suffer with FOMO, therefore, what I'm going to do today is I'm going to walk away the next time I feel FOMO. And that's, again, not necessarily a bad idea. But if you say, I am a more disciplined, I currently lack patience. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that I'm more disciplined. I'm going to have more self-control. I'm going to have more willpower. Everyone starts to focus on changing their actions, right? If you're thinking about this idea of becoming more patient, how do I revenge trade less? How can I execute without hesitation at the times when I'm supposed to? Everyone focuses on action-based outcomes, right? They're thinking about ways in which they can tweak what they are physically doing to create change in the markets. And it's not a bad line of thinking. Ultimately, action is the key to make any change. If all the changes only happen in your mind and nothing actually physically, you're never going to experience any change, any results. So the problem is what I tell people, if you understand that everything that we have explained so far starts with an issue in the mindset. It starts with an issue with your mind trying to avoid some kind of pain. And so if the issue is starting in the mind, what makes the most sense is actually to address the issue in the mind and then change your action. Because once you better understand what's going on psychologically, changing your action is going to become infinitely easier because now you're focusing on the right problem. Okay. So we've talked a little bit about actions, right? We've talked about how people are experiencing problems psychologically, and what they're focusing on is usually trying to change their actions. What I want to talk about is something a little bit more psychologically based to begin with. And this is the idea of cognitive biases. Okay. Is there anyone in the chat today? Again, I'm just going to throw it out there to begin with. Is there anyone that is familiar with the term cognitive bias? Has anyone come across that before? Anyone understand what that means? Maya says confirmation bias, recency bias. We're about to unpack all of these. These are really common examples of cognitive biases. But has anyone actually heard the term before or understand what a cognitive bias is? If you do, feel free to throw it in the chat. I'm going to go through it anyway to make sure everyone's kind of up to the same page. So a cognitive bias is an error in our thinking. Where are my notes here? Which occurs when processing and interpreting, this is going to sound like such a long-winded explanation. I'm going to break it down for you very simply. Information in the world around them. Okay? It's an error in your thinking which occurs when either processing or interpreting information in the world around them. And what it tends to give you is a warped version of reality. This is something which every single human being suffers from. It's not just traders, but it has a huge impact in terms of what we do in the markets. And so what I want to give you is some very common cognitive biases, which specifically traders are going to suffer with. Okay. The first one is recency bias, right? This is one of the ones that Maya's pointed out in the chat. This is one that I talk about a hell of a lot. Recency bias is the tendency for most humans to put more emphasis on things that have happened recently as opposed to what happens over a larger sample size of time, right? We put more information on what happens recently over a larger sample size of time. And again, this happens in every aspect of life. For those of you that have maybe been in a relationship and then you've had a bad relationship with your girlfriend or boyfriend or partner, whatever it is, you tend to be a little bit more cautious going into your next relationship. Again, you're being weighed down by recent experiences. If you've been screwed over by one of your friends before, if they backstabbed you, they've done something to, ruin their friendship or a business relationship, whatever it may be, you're going to be more cautious about the next person that you trust in terms of a friendship or a business relationship. It's just natural. And in trading, this impacts us in a massive way. If you experience a loss or a string of losses, you're more likely to feel unconfident about your approach because you're constantly caught up on what has recently happened. Whereas on the flip side, if you've had a string of winning trades, you might feel too confident about your approach. You might start to get cocky or arrogant, or you might start neglecting certain parts of your strategy because you're so weighed down by the recent experiences and you're not focusing on really what happens over a larger sample size of time. So again, very, very common example. The other one I like to talk about, again, exactly in line with what Myers has mentioned so far, confirmation bias, right? This is the tendency to only look for information that fits a specific bias in our mind. So it's no different to you guys jumping onto, let's say, euro dollar going into next week. And if you've got a bullish bias, the market could fall and fall and fall. But because you are only looking to get long that market, you have this blind spot to not be able to see short setups. And then you look back at the end of the week, you fucking blown another challenge account and you're looking, you're like, what did I do wrong? It was so obviously going down. Why didn't I just try and sell it? It's an exact example of confirmation bias, right? We're only looking for information that supports our current narrative and we ignore things which tend to fall outside that paradigm. It's the exact same. The thing that I always got guilty of is I would start analyzing the charts in different ways to try and fit my initial analysis, right? I would have a level get broken that would tell me my trade was now invalidated, and suddenly I would jump onto a daily chart. I'd be drawing up a Fibonacci level and I'd be saying, yeah, like, we're still touching the 50%. And as long as we stay here, I was justifying reasons as to why my bias fits instead of actually just accepting the market for what it was really telling me. Okay. Another very common one, loss aversion bias. Again, if I can spell, Jesus Christ. Loss aversion bias. This is the natural human tendency to want to avoid losses, right? more so than actually gaining the exact same amount of money. So for example, if you were to lose $100, $500, $1,000 today, and you were to make the exact same amount of money tomorrow, the loss of today would feel much, much heavier. And so we have a natural inclination to not want to experience a loss. Again, we discussed this. This links directly back with our natural survival instinct, our natural pain avoidance mechanism, okay? Couple other popular ones, overconfidence bias. Again, very closely linked with recency bias, but we tend to get overconfident in our ability, and this skews our perception of what should be possible in the markets, and ultimately, again, puts you in a position where you overestimate your ability, and you either mismanage risk, you start over trading, you do things outside of your plan, which again, tends to screw you over. The last one, just to make you aware of, is negativity bias. Jesus Christ, really can't spell today. Negativity bias, okay? This is the natural human tendency. I'm presuming this one is going to be obvious for a lot of people. It's the natural human tendency where we tend to put more emphasis on negative things as opposed to positive. You guys might relate to this in the sense of, have you ever done maybe online shopping and you look at the like 5 or 10 negative reviews and you ignore the 990 positive reviews and you're like, well, that one could screw me over. That could go wrong for me. You only focus on the negative. You don't focus on the positive, and again, tends to have a negative impact. And it goes back again to that survival instinct. It's your mind trying to make you aware of a potential source of pain and then make sure that you can avoid it and eliminate it by not having to go down that path. Okay? So these are some of the most common cognitive biases. There are hundreds of these, but from my experience, both from my trading and working with hundreds of traders over the last few years, these are probably 5 of some of the most common ones. They tend to come up time and time again. Again, everyone's going to be different. Everyone's going to suffer with different ones. But generally speaking, these are ones that come up a lot of the time, and they can be linked and traced back to many of the bad habits that you guys experience. Okay. So before we get on to the juicy stuff of today, which is talking about the importance of beliefs, is everyone on board with everything that I've discussed so far? Is this making sense to everyone? Can you guys relate to some of the things that I'm talking about here? You can maybe see it in yourselves or see it in others that are in the markets. Okay, perfect. Good stuff. I see a lot of the things in myself. Yeah, agreed. Dino says, does this belong to negativity bias? Are you referring to, which part are you referring to there, Dino? I kind of lost you there for a second. Okay, so it seems like at least so far, everyone is on board. Everyone seems to understand. Okay, negativity bias. Yes, in a way. In a way. And again, I'm going to explain this. I'm going to explain this now. This is the next section that I'm going to be working on, okay? So we've covered cognitive biases. Now I want to move on to the important part today, which is our belief system. This is probably the area of trading that is talked about the least. I don't see anybody online really talking about the power of your belief system unless you're into the coaching space as it is. But I think it's probably one of the most important areas of trading that psychologically, at least, you guys need to better understand. So I want to give you guys, I want to start by introducing a little bit of a framework, right? And that framework is this idea that everything starts with a belief. Beliefs determine your thoughts. Thoughts influence your emotions. Sorry, I'm going to clean this up in a second. Emotions change how you act. Actions you repeat become habits. Habits are part of your identity. Okay? This is a framework that we are going to come back to time and time again over these 8 weeks, because it is the key to unpacking every single one of your bad habits. And we're going to start doing that exactly today, right? I know there are some of you probably on the call today that we had some discussions in the Discord, and I was going through answering a few questions and giving you guys some insights. This is the core of everything you need to understand. And I think what's going to happen probably over these coming 8 weeks is the more and more sessions that we have, the less and less questions that you have, because you'll start to understand the framework and the process, right? everything starts with a belief. The beliefs that you have determine your thoughts. Depending on what you think influences your emotions. Emotions tend to change how you act. That's how most people operate. The actions that you repeat become habits, and then habits ultimately are part of your identity. Okay? So the reason that I don't like to start by telling people to change their actions is if you look at this framework, and if this framework makes sense to you, then you have to understand actions is almost bottom of the pile, right? When you're talking about changing who you are and your identity towards trading, actions are basically some of the most surface level things that you can change. And again, some of you will relate to this because maybe you'll decide, you know what, fuck this, I'm going to stop being a degenerate gambler and I'm going to fix up and I'm going to start doing something. And you can do it well for like a day or a week. And then you end up going back to the same person that you used to be. You start doing all the same stupid shit that you used to do. And it's because you haven't been able to have or create enough awareness around your belief system and what is keeping you locked in place. Okay. So what we are going to be doing differently is we are going to be fixing all your issues by focusing on three things: your beliefs and experiences. We're going to be focusing on building confidence in your edge. And we're going to be talking about having a process or framework in place. Okay. If you can leave the end of these 8 weeks and you can walk away with these three things in a better place than you are today, understanding more about your beliefs and experiences, building confidence in your edge, and having a process or a framework as to how you should go about operating the markets, you will guaranteed become an infinitely better trader. I am yet to meet someone that goes through and really spends time with these three things and doesn't see some improvement in their trading. Okay. Where are we? Marlon says, I still have problems with my bad habits I created throughout my 3 years of trading, even though I'm aware of them. Okay. So we're going to dive into this today. Okay. I actually want to start talking about this now. I think this is going to be really, really important. The reason I say this towards the end of the session, I'm aiming to run each of these sessions, by the way, for about 60 minutes, and then we'll open things up for a little bit of Q&A. But ultimately, everything that we talk about in these sessions, I want you guys to walk away from, and I want you to reflect on them, because many of the things that I'm going to ask you today may not be things that you are consciously aware of at the time. You may not be able to recognize where things came from today. It may require a certain period of reflection. Okay. I want to talk about this a little bit. So every single one of us has a belief system. Your belief system is either going to help you to thrive, or it's going to limit you and hold you back from things that you're actually, possible from achieving. You talk to someone that is used to making $1,000 a month, right? And then you compare that to someone that is making $100,000 a month. They both operate in the same world. They both have exposure to the same information, to some degree, the same people. You operate in a very, very similar standpoint on a similar battlefield, but the difference is you have a completely different set of beliefs which fuels your world. The person that is making $100,000 a month, for example, is going to look at someone making $10,000 and be like, fuck, that's nothing. Like, I can make that in my sleep if I wanted to. And if they lost it all, especially if they're self-made, chances are they'd be able to recreate it very, very quickly going forward. And again, the difference comes from your belief system. So many of us in trading, we bring a belief system with us that has come from childhood. It's come from experiences. This is where the majority of our beliefs have started. If you agree with the idea that none of us, we all came into the world neutral, right? That's how I best like to put it. We all came into the world neutral. We then had to learn how to speak. We had to learn how to talk. We had to learn how to walk. We had to learn how to go to the bathroom for ourselves. There is nothing that we knew coming into this world that anybody else had an advantage with us over, right? We were all born at the exact same place. And what we had different is different experiences and a different belief system that was instilled through childhood, through our parents, through our friends, through our social circles. And these were things that we all just took on board, but we never really questioned them because we were too young to really understand what that meant for us. Okay. So a lot of us come to trading with very simple limiting beliefs like, I'm not good at this, or I always make the wrong decisions, because that's what you've been programmed to believe about life. That's what you've been told in school. That's what you've been told about the reasons why you may or may not have passed exams. That's what your parents told you about never being, good enough or the right child, whatever it may be. These are all pre-existing beliefs that you bring with you into the world of trading. And then they start to adapt as you get into the markets, right? You start learning different ways of analyzing the markets, and then you come up with a belief system that says the market should do this. Because this happened, this order block got hit, we had this break of structure, we had this fair value gap, we had whatever fucking concept names you want to put out there, it does not matter. Because all of these things happened, the market should do this. You're looking for certainty because in every other aspect of life, that's what we're wired to look for. We're looking for certainty. And in reality, those are the belief systems that are screwing you over. Those are the belief systems that are really holding you back from unlocking your full potential in the markets. Now, I want to show you guys a picture. I'm going to try and copy this from my, give me 1 second. Okay, copy. Okay, can everyone see this funny little picture of the elephant attached to this rope? Okay, I'm hoping you guys can all now see this on the whiteboard. Just yes or no in the chat. Has anyone ever seen this picture before? Does anyone know what this represents and what I'm about to share with you guys? Anyone familiar with this at all? Okay, a few people very familiar with this. Some people know, some people, yes, split bag. Okay. This idea is essentially how our belief systems work as human beings. Okay. This picture represents an elephant essentially being tied to the ground by a rope and a simple wooden pick, right? Haraj says it correctly, right? This is the story of essentially how your mind tends to hold you back. So some of you may understand this picture from maybe the likes of a circus. You may have seen an elephant in real life tied to the ground in this way. And the most obvious thing that you look at when you look at a picture like this is, why doesn't the elephant just rip the rope out of the ground and do whatever the fuck it wants, right? Why does the elephant believe that he is stuck with this little piece of wood and this little rope? And how this is done is the elephant essentially, when they were smaller, when they weren't as strong or weren't as big as they are when they grow into full-fledged adults, they are tied to the ground in the exact same way. And when they're young, they try and break free, they push, they pull, they struggle. And because they're not strong enough, they can't break free. And ultimately what happens is the elephant at some point just gives up, tries every day, every week, whatever it is. At some point in time, it gives up. And the elephant at that point in time has formed a belief. And that belief is, I am incapable of breaking free of this rope and this pick. Now, what happens is the elephant becomes older, it becomes stronger, it becomes bigger. And when it's tied down in the exact same way, it doesn't try and break free, not because it's not capable of doing so, but simply because it doesn't believe it's possible, right? It's linked back to its belief system. And we work exactly the same way as human beings. We have all picked up beliefs from childhood, from school, from our parents, our colleagues, somebody from a younger area of life. This is generally where our beliefs tend to be formed. And we take them as truths of the world. We never tend to question them. We never tend to think back and reflect on them. And we believe that some things aren't possible because of what we've learnt at some point in time. Okay. Now, this is exactly what tends to hold traders back. This is exactly the problem that you experience and why you struggle to break free of all of your bad habits. Okay. Now, I want to take you back to what we discussed in this section here, right? Where we talked about the purpose of the mind. We talked about this idea that your mind has a pain avoidance mechanism and it is constantly trying to avoid pain and to seek pleasure. Now, when we are new into trading and we're new into the markets and we have no idea what we're doing or how we should be acting in any way, shape, or form, it's very possible that we can operate in a way that we can get lucky, right? We could operate in a way where we could do everything wrong and it's possible to get lucky. Now, when your mind learns that we can be rewarded for doing something which is not necessarily in our best interest, that poses a very significant problem for you guys. Because again, if you understand that your mind is always trying to avoid pain and it is always trying to seek pleasure, then if you have a bad habit that you are struggling to break, it's because your mind has been rewarded from it at some point in time. So the question that I would want to ask you guys, or maybe the way in which I want you to think about this is, if, for example, I want everyone on the call today to think about a bad habit that they currently have. You could put it in the chat, you could think about it in your mind, whatever the case. I want you to think about a bad habit that you currently have. It might be revenge trading, it might be FOMO, it might be over trading, it might be lacking patience, whatever it may be. If every time you perform that bad habit, the moment you hit buy or sell, imagine you blew your account. It doesn't matter how much money was in there. It doesn't matter what size challenge account you bought. You instantly failed. The moment you acted on the bad habit, without hesitation, your account was blown. If you had $1,000, $10,000, $100,000 account, the moment you acted on your bad habit, it goes to zero and you've lost everything. How many times are you going to repeat that before you learn your mistake? How many times do you think that's going to happen before you think, you know what, fuck, I can't keep doing this, because every time I do this, it leads to a bad place. And if you guys don't believe me, how would you feel if I said, you know what, I want everyone to get off the call today. By the way, this is not advice. This is purely for hypothetical purposes. I have to make sure I don't get a fucking lawsuit after this call. If I said to you guys, after this call, I want you to go tie a blindfold on your head and I want you to go walk around in the roads for 1 hour and you'll be okay. You'll be safe. Most of you don't need to go and do that to understand it's a stupid fucking idea, right? Most of you don't need that experience to understand it's not a good thing. You understand the consequences because you've heard about someone being run over before, right? If you were burned by an iron when you were a child, how many times are you going to keep touching the iron? You learn from those experiences, right? Your mind learns from pain and it constantly tries to keep you away from it. For those of you that have a bad habit, so we'll go through some of the ones that you guys have talked about so far. Lack of patience, hesitation, lack of discipline, sometimes not journaling. A mistake more than once is a decision. I like that, Myers, right? Every single one of you that have shared your bad habits there, I want you to think about, at some point in time, you were rewarded for that behavior, right? So for example, Rodrigo says, I have a lack of patience. I can promise you, Rodrigo, at some point in time, you acted on impulse, you weren't patient, and actually you made money from that situation. I promise you, it's somewhere, one time in your experience. It could have been your first trade, it could have been your last trade, it could have been several trades in between. But at some point in time, you could have done the wrong thing and you could have been rewarded from it. Harach says hesitation, right? Hesitation, I presume you mean in terms of maybe execution. I can guarantee you there was a point in time where you were supposed to execute and you hesitated and you didn't execute, and then that position ended up losing money. You saved yourself from a loss, and you taught your mind that if I listen to my impulse of hesitation, maybe sometimes I can save myself money, right? Mark says a lack of discipline, sometimes not journaling, right? Again, the lack of discipline, maybe that translates into your trading as well. Maybe that means sometimes not sticking to your rules. Maybe that sometimes means taking trades outside of your plan. And I can promise you, at some point in time, you've been rewarded from that bad behavior. Now, Rodrigo says, I have lost more than I have made, but I still keep doing it. Again, the important part here is not the fact that you've lost more than you've made. The problem is that you've made, right? If you were punished for every time you did your bad habits, you would never want to repeat them again. But your mind, when it's put into a state of fight or flight, when it's put into a state of fear, it goes back to, how can I find a reward? And your mind remembers the situations where you have made money and it makes it more attractive to try and do that thing. NNM says, I remember once I overtraded and I was rewarded with the opportunity to recover my losses. Bingo. These are exactly the type of situations that you want to be able to identify, right? These are exactly the type of situations that you have to understand. This is where your belief system was born. If you never understand where your beliefs have come from, you will constantly keep going around in a circle because you don't understand the entire foundation of why I believe I should FOMO or lack discipline or hesitate or lack patience is flawed. Until you can identify that the whole system was fucked from the very beginning, you will be constantly bound by this belief system, okay? So what I want you guys to do is the first thing and the most important thing you could start taking away from today. And I'm going to put this in our exercise section as we start to wrap up. The most important thing you could do today is I want you to write down every single bad habit that you have that is keeping you from either becoming profitable or just causing you to throw away money. Because there may be some of you on here that already have some sense of profitability, but you're giving away a lot more money, okay? What I want you to do is recognize where that bad habit started. I want you to recognize where it actually came from. I want you to think back to the earliest experience that you had where you did your bad habit and you were rewarded from it. And what some of you may experience is that you are in a place where you can't remember when you did it, but the belief just it appeared. And what most people figure out is actually you've taken on the belief of somebody else. You've seen somebody else FOMO into a position right before FOMC or CPI or PPI or NFP or whatever it is, and you've seen them get rewarded from it. And you're like, fuck it, if they can do it, so can I. If they can make money by gambling red folder news, I can do the same thing as well. I can make money. And you've adopted a belief system of somebody else, but you need to identify where the belief has come from, okay? Rodrigo says, if I put a rubber band on my wrist and every time I do something I shouldn't, I pull and release the rubber band and it hurts me, will it stop me doing something that will harm me? So Rodrigo, this is an interesting question, right? First thing I want you to recognize, do you remember earlier on in today's session, I was like, the default mode of operation that everyone does is they are constantly trying to fix problems with actions. For me, I look at the act of the rubber band on the wrist as an action. It's a process-orientated action, something physical that you can do that is going to help you to stop trying to continually repeat that action. Now, the answer to your question is yes, it can definitely help, right? You can introduce a sense of pain, which you understand now that your mind does not like. However, the purpose of what we're doing today is to focus here, is to focus entirely on the mindset. It's to focus on understanding that you have to uncover where the belief has come from if you truly want to become free of it. And you can only do that by thinking back, reflecting on your past to either the habits that you have done or the habits that you've seen somebody else do, and you've taken them on board and embrace that as a truth of your reality, okay? Dino says, I have a belief that passing something feels so hard, even though it can be simple. That's my problem too, right? So whatever your problems are, I want you to think back on a time where you were rewarded for bad behavior. You were rewarded for something which is holding you back at this point in time. The moment you can identify that experience, I then want you to reflect on that experience, right? So let's start putting this in the exercise section of today, because this is what I want to leave you guys with. Okay? Think back and identify where and when your bad habits started and when you experienced a reward. Okay? Because this is the reason that you are constantly going around in circles over and over and over again. Until you can better understand the belief system inside your mind, and then you can start to understand as to how flawed it is, you will always be bound by the same belief system. You'll basically just be like this elephant. You'll be stuck trying to do something different, but until you break free of that rope and pick, you will constantly be stuck in place, okay? Now, once you've identified that experience, I'm hoping this is something that you can do between now and next week. I'm hoping you can have a moment to reflect. Maybe some of you will already start to recognize this now. Maybe some of you are going to have to really think back as to when these problems started and where these belief systems were learned from. When you've identified that experience, I want you to start thinking about those and I want you to ask yourself the question, what if it never worked out this way, right? What if it never worked out that way? That time when you were rewarded for your bad behavior, what if it didn't happen that way? What if you were always stuck in a cycle where every time you acted on a bad habit, you were punished? How would that change your experience? And what we are doing here is I'm not asking you to do anything physical yet, right? There are going to be times where we get you to do actual physical activity. Everything at the moment is mental. I want you to notice where your beliefs are coming from. And I want you to start challenging and stretching your mind to think about this situation in a different way. I want you to think about what happens if that experience never went the way that it did. Where would I be today? Would I be in a better or a worse position? Would I be more disciplined or less disciplined, right? And again, go back to this idea that you are always trying to avoid pain, and seek pleasure. Your mind is focused on these small scenarios that have found pleasure in what you do. And until you can be conscious of those, it's very, very difficult to break free from that belief system. Once you can start thinking and challenging the initial belief, every experience after that will start to feel completely different. You'll suddenly start to feel like, this is something that I should be avoiding. I shouldn't be thinking and feeling and acting this exact same way. And then making those changes, making the action related changes are going to become far, far easier to do. Okay. But this is the absolute start of everything. And this is where I feel like most people go wrong because they don't understand why they're thinking about things in a certain way. Marlon says, I think the idea of every time I repeat that bad habit, I blow the account, no matter what the balance is very nice. But how can we manage to trick our minds into thinking that it's true? I'm pretty sure that someone here, including me, will find a way around that and it still repeats. So I'll give you something else to work on today, Marlon, right? I threw this out in the Discord, and this is something that you can take away from today. Again, it's going to be something that we introduce in the future, but I want you to be able to have something actionable to take away from today. If you feel like that, you're still going to fall into this the same bad habits. And again, I want to be clear with you guys. Going through this exercise is not instantly going to snap you out and be like, I'm a fucking different person. All my problems are fixed from next week. It doesn't work like that. Your belief systems were born over time, and breaking them will also take time, but you have to start with the right framework. And that framework starts at the very beginning. Okay. I'm gonna give you something today, which again, I'll introduce in the coming weeks anyway. I'm going to take you back to this idea that your mind is constantly avoiding pain and seeking pleasure. So the one thing that you can do, if you find that you're thinking that you're still going to be repeating a lot of these bad habits, I put this out, I think, in one of the Discords. I want you, one of the threads that we started on Discord. I want you to think about the bad habit that you have. So let's say it's FOMO, just for example, right? It doesn't have to be FOMO, whatever it is. Let's say you have a bad habit of acting on FOMO. I want you to reflect back on your journals and look at how much money did FOMO cost me last time, right? Let's say, for example, it's $100. The last time you acted on FOMO and you broke your plans and you were punished from it, it cost you $100. Now, what I want you to do is multiply $100 by 252. 252 is the average trading days per year, right? So what you're essentially doing here is saying, if I acted on my bad habit every single day, hypothetically, if I acted on it every single day and I did nothing differently, my bad habit isn't actually costing me $100. My bad habit is actually costing me $25,200. Is that right? Yeah, $25,200. I had to check my math there for a second. My bad habit is actually costing me $25,200. What this is going to start to do for you psychologically is make the price of your bad habit much more painful. Again, think about what we're doing psychologically here. Psychologically, we understand that your mind is going to be linked to your most recent experience. It's only going to focus on the short term, and it's only going to focus on a $100 loss. That might feel shit today, but in reality, what you're actually doing is you're solidifying a $25,200 loss over the space of the year. That is the true cost of your bad habit. So one way you can be more inclined to start breaking free of these habits is by making them as painful as possible. And you make them painful by amplifying them, by showing yourself that this is what you're actively making a reality. So if, let's say, again, your numbers might not be $100, it might be more, it might be less. Whatever that number is for you, I want you to write it down, put it on the background of your computer, write it down on your phone, put it on a piece of paper. And every time you feel like acting like a degenerate and going in on FOMO or risking whatever it is, I want you to remind yourself, I am making this number a reality for myself. I am costing myself this amount of money. And with that money, I could have quit my 9-to-5 job. I could have, bought my parents a car. I could have paid off a portion of their mortgage. I could have gone and had all these bucket list experiences. I'm really fucking up myself and the people around me, and that's really important to me. Okay. I hope that gives you something to work on, Marlon. Haraj says, what would you advise about hesitation in execution? Haraj, exactly the same framework, right? For now, we're keeping it simple. Think back to where the experience was born from and start by amplifying the pain. You can amplify the pain the opposite way. If you're seeing that you're missing out on experiences, on opportunities to trade that are making money, let's say, for example, every profitable trade that you're missing out on is costing you $100 every time you execute. Multiply 100 by 252, and your bad habit is costing you $25,200 every single year because you are hesitating. Now, getting into fixing that hesitation is actually going to be a little bit different. But again, it can amplify the pain enough to make you want to start acting differently. I actually think a lot of hesitation is usually linked with a lack of confidence. And that's going to be something we do an entire session on. But that is I guess, the crux of today. Okay. We're going to wrap up here. Are there any final questions before we wind down for the day? Is everyone clear about what I want them to do in terms of their homework and reflection and things like this? Dino says, are the sessions every Friday at this time? I'm going to do my best to do them definitely every Friday. I don't know if they're going to be at this exact same time. I know that there are some members, I think we had one of them in Discord that mentioned he was in Singapore. And so trying to maybe do them a little bit earlier might be beneficial. I'm going to try and tailor them to try and get as many people on here as possible so they can get in live, ask questions, whatever they need to do. But yeah, I'm going to try for every Friday, probably similar sort of time. But again, I'll always give you guys at least 24 to 48 hours notice. NNM says, will we receive this scheme? Yeah, if you mean the writing on the board, then yeah, 100%. Let me stop sharing this for a second. Will we relieve the stream? Yes, so everything's recorded. I will upload this very, very shortly, and you will get a copy of the notes here as well, which you can refer back to. Rodrigo says, what is your advice we should do on the routine before starting the trading day? It's a good question, Rodrigo. I think it's really going to depend on the person. For a lot of people, I would say that you need to work on your strengths. Double down on your strengths and improve on your weaknesses. That's going to be different for absolutely everyone. So I would say the specific routine that you need is going to be independent. But there are certain things that I recommend for a lot of people that get done on a day-to-day basis, which I think is helpful for the next day. The two of those, and again, we're going to cover an entire session on these in the future, meditation and journaling. For me, game changers for me. Some people might not like them. Some people might be super keen. Meditation and journaling, I think if you can incorporate both of those, it will have a massive, massive impact, at least from the psychological aspect. Hirach says, every time I hesitate to take the trade and it goes to TP, my whole day becomes a disaster. This regret hits very deep. Hirach, the honest truth is, if it was that painful, you would never do it again. Genuinely speaking, if it was that painful, you would never do it again. How many times do you need to stab yourself in the leg to stop stabbing yourself in the leg? Once. Genuinely, right? This is why I say that amplifying the pain exercise can be quite helpful. If you're still going through it, you probably don't understand the belief system behind it, and it's not painful enough for you to want to break it. Eclipse says, I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Eclipse says, I'm finding that my main problem is when I'm facing challenges, I feel like I'm losing time. When I spend there much time and eventually start doing stupid mistakes. Eclipse, I'm going to go out on a limb here. This may be completely off board. I'm going to say maybe your issue is linked with social media. Maybe. I could be completely wrong. Maybe you don't even have social media. I'm going by probably some of the most common reasons as to why people experience this. And it's because they have a perception of when they should achieve success that is not really based on them. It's based on what they've seen other people do. And you feel like just because you're spending more or less time on a certain thing, it's fucking up your mentality and you're taking too long to do it. In reality, it's all an illusion. Like I said, most people online are not making money. The more you detach yourself from that and you just focus on 1% better every day, you'll start to improve drastically. Usually I can act properly for like a month or two and then I blow it all in a couple of weeks. And this is stuff that we'll talk about, Eclipse, right? The process of what we're going to do is to give you guys a framework that you can take away and, you can be more disciplined going forward. So yeah, I think this is something that's going to be really helpful for you over the coming 8 weeks. Can you give us a high level overview of the sessions to come? Myers, if you jump into the Discord, the very first message that was posted by David, there was a poster that was put out with the topic of every session that was coming out. But yeah, we're covering a variety of stuff. We've got, today was beliefs. We've got uncertainty, expectations, attachment, emotions, discipline, confidence, and an overall framework and Q&A. So very high level overview. Hiraj says, I need to rewatch this session. Huge values provided. Thank you so much, man. I appreciate that. I tend to compare myself with others. NNM says, I get funded 5 times. When it comes time to withdraw the money, I burn the account. NNM, we're going to be discussing that through our sessions, the attachment to money, things like that. We're going to be discussing all of that stuff. Okay. Guys, I hope you found that impactful. I hope you got some value behind that. Again, take these exercises from today seriously. Really give them some time to reflect over what you're doing. I hope it's helped you just to think about things a little bit of a different way. That's the main thing of what we're trying to achieve here. There's pretty much zero chart work going on. It's all about reflection internally. Okay, guys, I'll leave you to enjoy the rest of your Fridays, and I look forward to speaking to you again next week. Take care, guys.